This week I was in the mood for some classic 1960s adventure cinema. You know, tough two-fisted movies that don't take crap from Nazis, baboons or slave traders. So I went into the video vault and moved aside the cats and the washing, and in a rare, blinding flash of insight I grabbed 3 movies I knew instantly would fit the bill. It was only when I got them back to the viewing zone that I realised all 3 of them were set in Africa and 2 of them were filmed there. They were filmed specifically in South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana and Namibia. The third one had locations in Jamaica for reasons I'll tell you about in a little bit. So let's get on with the movies right after you subscribe to the channel. Subscribe now. You can hit the like and the notification bell at the end of the video. That's only fair. Actor-director Cornel Wilde based this movie on the story of John Coulter, a trapper who fled from a large party of Blackfoot through the wilds of Montana in 1809. The Naked Prey is a chase movie pared down to its bare essentials. Wilde plays a character only known as Man, a 19th century guide who takes a crew of elephant hunters on a safari. The boss of the hunters disrespects and assaults a local warrior played by King Gampu when he politely asks them for tribute to pass through his lands.
I'm not giving them anything. What the hell for? Who says they own this land?
They've been here for generations, long enough to call it their own.
The hunters go on to kill female elephants, and then the warriors capture them. They take them back to the tribe, and those among the hunters who disrespected the tribe suffer humiliating deaths. But Man is given a chance for a lion's death. He is stripped naked. An arrow is shot into the distance, and he is told to run. When he reaches the arrow, a team of warriors pursue him. The leader of the warriors is played by the great King Gampu, who I mentioned in my Joe Bullitt review. Gampu was the first black South African movie star. He was a big, tough ex-cop, and in The Naked Prey he gives us an antagonist who is completely comprehensible, even though we don't speak his language. Cornel Wilde was 54 when he made this movie, and he is chiseled AF. Due to the rigours of filmmaking and the fact that he was bitten by an iguana, he was sick for much of the shoot, but he claimed that his illness helped his performance. The Naked Prey got a Criterion release about 15 years ago, and rightly so. It is shot unlike any 1960s adventure action film you've ever seen. Wilde started his career as part of the Hollywood machine, but he never really fitted in with it. The Naked Prey uses a widescreen Panavision format imaginatively, sometimes letting the locations determine where the camera is placed and how it moves in the action, and the camera moves around a lot more than usual lockdown Panavision cameras at the time. And the other thing that blew me away was the original script for this movie was only 9 pages long. There's a visceral impact to the violence and the action in this movie, and it's way ahead of its time in the way it dealt with race. All of the characters in this movie, particularly the tribesmen and the other people that Man meets, have agency and emotional range. Cornel Wilde was a gritty individualist filmmaker in the same way that Sam Fuller was. In The Naked Prey, he found new ways to tell a simple story, which he said was partly based on The Most Dangerous Game. It's a reliable format too. In the 1950s, another version of the story worked as well. A film called Run for the Sun starring Richard Widmark, Jane Greer and Trevor Howard. You should check that one out too. But The Naked Prey is, at its heart, the story of survival and the story of respect for other cultures. And that wasn't necessarily something that was a part of most cinema in the 1960s. And in that way, The Naked Prey plays a lot better to us these days than it did even at the time it was put out. Sansa the Kalahari has one of the coolest, craziest endings of any 1960s action film. If you've already seen the movie, you know what I mean, and if you haven't, you're in for some fun. I first saw this survival action adventure movie in the 1970s on TV, and it blew me away then, and to an extent it still does. The story is, again, one of survival. A small charter flight from Windhoek in Namibia, heading for Johannesburg, is hit by a locust swarm and crashes into the Kalahari Desert. The survivors find sanctuary in a small mountain range in the desert. The mountains have water and food, sana melons and other desert vegetables, and the survivors find themselves sharing this austere habitat with a savage tribe of baboons. The group are a mixed lot: Bain, a drunken engineer played by Stanley Baker; O'Brien, a hunter played by Stuart Whitman; Grimmelman, the ever-reliable Harry Andrews, Dr. Bondakai, played by Theodore Bickel, the pilot Sturdivant, played by Nigel Davenport, and one woman, Grace Monkton, played by Susanna York. Stanley Baker and his producer-director partner Cy Enfield based the movie on a novel by William Mulvihill. Originally they wanted Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor to star in it, but they were too expensive and they also would have been really shit at it. Then George Papard agreed to do the Bane role, but dropped out after production started. Stuart Whitman was hired, and then he and Stanley Baker agreed to swap roles. That was a great move. In the movie, as two of the survivors strike out to get help, the mountain becomes a Darwinian environment where O'Brien decides he's the alpha male and that the resources available aren't enough for everyone. Sansa the Kalahari has some great action set pieces, and the acting's really good. You should particularly check out Nigel Davenport as Sturdivant, who starts out cocky and a little rapey, but ends a totally different character. Susanna York in a thankless role in some ways is good as Grace, and Baker playing against type as the alcoholic and injured Bane is really good too. But ultimately it's Stuart Whitman's O'Brien that we remember for a number of good reasons that I'll let you discover for yourselves. There are so many good scenes in this movie. There's a great one where Theodore Bickel's character finds some Kalahari Bushmen who only speak Xhosa and is rescued by them. Most of the film was shot in Namibia with a bit of shooting in Spain and also on the sets of Pinewood Studios. But for the most part it's location work, and the locations here are austere and stunning. Sansa the Kalahari was a financial flop when it came out, and it saw the end of Stanley Baker's production company. But it's a hidden gem of 60s action cinema, and if you don't remember anything else, just remember that those baboons are bloody scary. In the 1960s, the great British cinematographer Jack Cardiff turned his hand to directing films. He wasn't as successful as a director as he was as a cinematographer, but in 1968 he made this gritty, harsh action film based on Wilbur Smith's 1965 novel. Dark of the Sun is a tough, brutal film about the post-colonial chaos of the Simba Rebellion in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Rod Taylor stars as Curry, a tough, no-nonsense mercenary. Jim Brown, in one of his first starring roles, is Rufo, another mercenary who also happens to be Congolese. We get Yvette Mimieux reuniting with Rod Taylor after the time machine as Claire, a woman fleeing from the rebellion, and a German actor called Peter Karsten, who plays a mercenary called Henlein, who is also an ex-Nazi. In supporting roles, we get Kenneth Moore as an alcoholic doctor, and Andre Morel as Bussier, the superintendent of a diamond mine who is sitting on $50 million of crystallized carbon that the new government needs to finance the reforms they plan to make. The mercenaries are hired to take a train to a remote mining town and bring back the people fleeing from the rebellion, as well as the diamonds. For an MGM studio movie of the 60s, this one goes in hard on the violence, and it avoids prettying up the grim business of soldiers for hire. There's a stunning scene where Henlein machine guns a pair of small black girls he believes are Simba's spies, and the movie doesn't shy away from the brutality of that. The scenes where the Simbas take over the mining town are played a little bit like stereotypes of African rebels, possibly based on real-life Simba atrocities against Belgian and French nuns in 1964. The movie never mentions the fact that the Simbas were Maoists and they were supported by China, so the politics behind these rebellions is never really addressed in the movie, but that's okay because it's not that kind of film. Taylor is great as Curry, a man who's in the deal for the dollars, and Jim Brown brings his A-game to Rufo, who is more idealistic and wants to save his country. Karsten as Henlein, of course, wants the diamonds, giving Curry ample opportunity to punch a Nazi. There are interesting subplots and themes in this movie that feed into the zeitgeist in America in 1968. Race, of course, is the big theme there, but there's also the arc of Curry's character where he goes from ruthless pragmatism through murderous rage against Henlein to an acceptance that the rule of law must prevail. One of the subtexts in this movie is about that tension between capitalism and doing things for money and doing things because they're the right thing to do. The fight scenes are really tough here as well. When Henlein attacks Curry with a swagger stick and a chainsaw, we first get an idea of Curry's innate ferocity. Rufo and Curry infiltrate the town after the Simbas take over, and that is full on too, though I really doubt any real mercenaries would throw grenades around while inside any building. We should also give props to Jacques Lucier's soundtrack, which is very different from the bombastic, brassy action film scores that we had at the time. Unlike the other movies I've mentioned here, Dark of the Sun was filmed in Jamaica. At the time, Central Africa wasn't an option for location shooting. But this one gets forgotten when people talk about action films. And that's a bit of a shame because I think it definitely has a lot going for it. It has those underlying themes which make it more than just a meathead action film. But the action scenes, including a really great series of scenes where the train is attacked by a mortar bombardment by the Simbas, work really well even in modern terms. You should check this one out. It's one of those great hidden 1960s action films in the same way that another one of Rod Taylor's movies, Darker Than Amber in 1970 is. And Darker Than Amber is well overdue a Blu-ray release. So there are my 3 1960s adventure movies. Let me know which ones you like to see. I know some people already in the community tab on the channel have speculated about which movies I was going to do, but there are just so many cool action films of the time. But in this case, I tried to pick a few that were a little more than just action films, and I think that they're well worth you checking out. Thank you very much for watching. You can support the channel by going to patreon.com/paleocinema and donating a little money there. You can also support the channel by leaving a comment and tell me what you think about these movies, because they are really among my favourites of 1960s action cinema. By the way, I got my second COVID vaccine jab yesterday and it didn't hurt me a bit. I'm still getting used to having X-ray vision and superpowers, but it was well worth doing. Don't die, keep watching, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some cool 1960s action cinema, and I'll catch you next time.